I've got a picture to show. If you're here last week, we talked about Esther. I talked about my grandmother dressing up as Esther, and my mom listened to it, and she sent me this picture, and this is the exact one that was in my head. So I show this for a few reasons, but one, to prove I didn't just make that story up, right? I was talking with Brad, and he said, yeah, I went home all day, and I was just like, I bet he made that thing up. That's what he was thinking. But no, that is my grandmother. That's my mom's mom. That's Mama J. I didn't expect that. But she's the reason we're here together. So she's for sure the reason that y'all are here. And she just was a precious woman of God. She was a complicated person, but she loved the Lord. And that's how she shared the story of Esther. And so that's what we talked about last week, right? Well, today we're going to talk about someone else who was sent and who had a purpose. In this next slide, you'll know who it is. Anyone know who I'm talking about with that little verse? That's Isaiah. Here I am, send me. Right? That's the passage in Isaiah. So we're going to be in Isaiah. I encourage you turn to Isaiah chapter 1. We're going to read a few verses here. But I wanted to, and I'm not going to say that I had every week planned out up to Easter, but one of the themes that I've just feel is that we need to be open to what God is calling us to do, right? And so last week we talked about Esther, very specific calling. Listen, the people are going to suffer and they are going to die. And I know this isn't anything that you ever thought you were called to, but maybe for such a time as this is why God has you in this place, right? And today we're going to look at Isaiah, a prophet in the Old Testament who served under numerous kings. And by the way, Esther was very successful in her calling, right? It worked out. Everything, God used her to stop the violence that was going to be coming upon the people of Israel. And we celebrate that, and we celebrate the success that Esther had because of God's hand on her. Isaiah is a prophet called to the kingdom of Judah at this time. So this is actually before Esther. Okay, so Esther was after the exile, and things had kind of fallen apart. If you remember the kingdom, whenever they left Egypt, they go back. Joshua brings them in. You have the nation of Israel. You have the kings, the judges, and then you have the kings. And then things start going downhill in a hurry. They split. You have the northern kingdom, southern kingdom. The northern kingdom gets overtaken by Assyria. Now you have the southern kingdom called Judah. And that's where Isaiah is. And he is a prophet during the time of a few different kings. One of them was Hezekiah, one of the best kings that Israel had, that Judah had during that time. He was also a prophet during the time of Ahaz, one of the worst kings that Judah had during that time. He experienced a lot. And I've heard Isaiah. You would recognize more of Isaiah than you know, because there's a lot of Isaiah that is quoted in the New Testament. Isaiah is talking about the fulfillment of how God will save the people. But it will be through Christ, right? And it's looking forward to that. So you see that throughout the book of Isaiah. But the most famous or well-known passages in Isaiah 6. It's Isaiah's calling that he receives. And God says, well, who will go for us? And Isaiah says, here I am, send me. And it's powerful, and it's a wonderful message. But the more that I see where we are as a church overall, I start realizing that much of the reason for that is because we haven't given full context and given the picture that Scripture gives. Picture gives a different scripture, a different picture of reality and the way that we interact with God and interact with the world around us than we typically see presented in our church messaging. And so I wanted to start with Isaiah chapter 1, because it's important to know, okay, what is Isaiah being called to? What is he being called into? So Isaiah chapter 1, verses 1 through 8. The vision of Isaiah, the son of Amoz, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for the Lord has spoken. Children have I reared and brought up, but they have rebelled against me. The ox knows its owner, the donkey its master's crib, but Israel does not know, my people do not understand. Just so you're clear, he's saying donkeys are smarter than you as people. Right? That's what he's saying. By the way, Isaiah is great. You should read Isaiah. It's some of the, now this is from what I'm told, it's some of the best Hebrew, the most poetic Hebrew in the way that it's written. It's a beautiful poetic book. It says, sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, offspring of evildoers, children who deal corruptly. They have forsaken the Lord. They have despised the Holy One of Israel. They are utterly estranged. Why will you still be struck down? It's like, why do you want to get hit in the face again? So he's asking, why? Why do you just keep wanting this to happen to you? Why will you continue to rebel? The whole head is sick, the whole heart faint. From the sole of the foot, even to the head, there is no soundness in it, but bruises and sores and raw wounds. They are not pressed out or bound up or softened with oil. Your country lies desolate. Your cities are burned with fire. In your very presence, foreigners devour your land. It is desolate, as overthrown by foreigners, and the daughter of Zion is left like a booth in a vineyard, like a lodge in a cucumber field, like a besieged city. All right, we're going to stop there because it keeps going on. Does that sound like a good circumstance that they're in? In fact, if you remove the Isaiah is specifically talking about Israel a long time ago, but do you hear any connections at all with maybe present circumstances? If you don't, I'm sorry, you need to learn to read. Like it's so clear, right? It's obvious. And again, I've said before, and I will say it again because it's important. Our country is not the second Israel. It's not anything like that. We are not God's new people. We are not replacing what he did with the Jewish people. However, there are clear similarities, unlike any other nation in the world. Now, you may wish that this wasn't true, but it is. Because when our nation started, it was the only other nation since Israel that started with a purpose. And that purpose included that we are going to be faithful to God, the God who created the world. And by the way, for any of those recording this or watching on recording, that apparently makes me a Christian nationalist today. Okay? And we are, but that is the fact, that is the truth about our country. That it was founded with that desire. It was not founded perfectly. It had a long way to go. But the desire is that this country would be a city on a hill, a light in the darkness. Because we're going to try to do things differently. We're not going to have our rights dictated to us by whoever is king and whatever kid they happen to birth, whether he was smart or an imbecile. We're going to go, you know what? How about we get our rights from the one who created the heavens and the earth? Maybe that will be a little bit better. Right? And it's not easy, but it is better. And that is how we started. Right? And that is how Israel started when God called them. But that puts a high responsibility on us as people when you make that covenant. And I'm sorry, we live with the ramifications of our founding fathers entering into a covenant. Right? We like to pretend that we don't, but we do. And so whenever you start seeing a group of people that founded themselves on following the precepts of the creator of the universe, and then they start to reject the creator of the universe and go their own way, there are consequences that come. And that's what Isaiah is experiencing. He's like, you are like children that are now going your own way. Here, I'm right here. God wants to lead. He wants to bless. He wants to use you, but you are choosing to go another direction. And it is leading to destruction. So Isaiah, he writes that. I'm just going to flip through. We are obviously going to end in chapter 6. It talks about the unfaithful city, the city of Jerusalem. It talks about Judah, big picture, Jerusalem, small picture. And then all of a sudden it'll talk about the mountain of the Lord. It'll talk about the judgment and the justice and how God still loves the people, that he wants them to come back to him. And then it talks about the day of the Lord. Some of those verses are clearly also referring to when Christ will come. Chapter 3 talks about judgment on Jerusalem and Judah. You continue to go. You get to chapter 5, and you see that the vineyard of the Lord is destroyed. He compares Israel like a vineyard that was planted and was nourished and sustained, and it was planted with a purpose, right? To produce fruit. And it says, but now you are producing wild grapes. Why are you producing wild grapes? Right? And there's a passage in there. It says, and now the hedge of protection will be removed. Right? So that's the situation that we get. And then Isaiah gets into, in chapter 5, woes to the wicked. He starts calling out, here's the wickedness that I'm seeing. And again, he's calling this out to the people of God, not all the surrounding areas. It's like, no, y'all, you know better. And this is what you are doing. And I want to read in chapter 5, verse 20. It says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes, shrewd in their own sight. Woe to those who are heroes at drinking wine and valiant men in mixing strong drink, who acquit the guilty for a bribe and deprive the innocent of his right. Summing up, woe to those who start to think that you are God and God is not. Because when that happens, you start calling good evil and evil good, and we are there. Verse 24, therefore, as the tongues of fire devours the stubble and as dry grass sinks down in the flame, so their root will be as rottenness and their blossom go up like dust, for they have rejected the law of the Lord of hosts and have despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. Verse 26, he will raise a signal for nations far away and whistle for them from the ends of the earth, and behold, quickly, speedily they come. Then verse 29, their roaring is like a lion, like young lions they roar. They growl and seize their prey. They carry it off and none can rescue. They will growl over it on that day like the growling of the sea. And if one looks to the land, behold, darkness and distress, and the light is darkened by its clouds. So that's the ramifications, right? He's saying there's going to be punishment for this. And sometimes we can spend too much time on this. In fact, this is what we like spending time on, especially in the church and as theologians. And we start saying, okay, well, Well, did God specifically, intentionally send those outside forces to destroy to destroy Israel and to bring about all this stuff? And we read and say, well, I think God did. Man, that's kind of a mean God that he would send these outside forces to destroy. And I believe God sent them to destroy. However, I also believe that when you turn away from God and you said that you were going to follow him, the consequences open you up to being devoured by the other nations, right? So it's not like God had to whisper in the king of Babylon's ear, okay, it's time to go now. I want you to go to Israel and destroy them. No, the king of Babylon was like, that used to be a really strong nation, and they seemed to be united on something, and we really didn't want to mess with that. Now they seem like they're all just like us, and they do the same things as us, and they really don't care about their borders. They don't care what's going on. And yeah, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and take them. That's how it works. It's not overcomplicated, right? And so that is the path that Israel is on. Now, they're still in this place. They're still on the roller coaster, right? So they're still their own country. There's still many of them. And it's also important, there would be most of the population, more than likely, would have still been faithful to God. But overall, that is not what society was starting to push. And so it was sucking more and more people away from their faith. That's where we have Isaiah entering in the picture. And so he is called into that context. That's important to understand. Right? What we're going through as a society right now, it's new to us, it's not new to history, and it's not new to God. Okay? And sadly, our society, we're entering into that up and down. And we're on the down, and I pray there's an up, right? But I believe that right now, in the midst of the down, God is calling Isaiah, because he's always called people. And this is how he calls Isaiah, chapter 6. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings, and 2 he covered his face, 2 he covered his feet, 2 he flew, and one called to one another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. I just stopped there for just a second. And that is a powerful scene. And I've heard unbelievable sermons, and this will not be one of them, preached on just those few verses. Right? But it is powerful. You can feel the awe-inspiring. That word awesome that we use all the time now is actually a word that was reserved for things like this. It's awe-inspiring, where you realize, oh my gosh, I'm in the presence of God, and he is holy. We think we get a glimpse of what holiness is like. We have no idea. And so Isaiah finds himself in the presence of God, at the foot of God, and there's these weird creatures there that clearly show the unbelievable power of God, and they're crying out, "Holy, holy, holy!" Right? It is such a powerful scene, and Isaiah responds as anyone would. And the foundations of the threshold shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. And I said, Woe is me. Now remember, we've just read all these woes, right, that Isaiah is talking to the people, and he's putting himself right in that category. Woe is me. Woe is me. He said, For I am lost. I am a man of unclean lips. By the way, Isaiah is a priest as well as a prophet. For that day and age, he was not lost. He was holy. He represented that which is holy. But when coming face to face to the one true God. He recognized, I am lost. I am a man of unclean lips. I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. I love what he does there. Is he blaming the society around him? No, he's like, no, I know where I live. I know the place that I am. And you know what? I'm in it with them. Right? I am unclean just as they are unclean. Because guess what? Compared to the glory of God, all of us are filthy rags. And Isaiah teaches us something very important here. Because what we tend to do, it's not that we disregard that there is sinfulness in the world around us and that we are sinful. Now, sometimes we say, oh, churches just they don't talk about sin anymore and stuff like that. That's not entirely true. We do. But what we usually do is we compare our sinfulness to the person we're sitting next to. Or the thing that I like to do today is I like to compare my sinfulness to the people who are leading our country. And I can say, man, at least I'm not out there. At least I haven't lost my ever-loving mind. Right? At least I don't support things that are demonic. Right? And that I can make me feel a little better. No, compared to the glory of God, we are all filthy rags. It is important that we understand that, because self-righteousness gets you nowhere. Right? It's righteousness that we seek. And so what Isaiah recognizes, because he would be in the same, he's probably a priest that has been imploring the people to quit being so stupid. Right? And he's like, why aren't y'all listening? Why aren't you turning back to God? Right? But when he gets the call from God and he sees God in a different way and he has that vision, he recognizes, no, I can't think that way. I'm in it just like everyone else. We are all unclean. And then, verse 6, then the one of the seraph flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal that he had taken with tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth and said, behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away. Your sin atoned for. Right? So that unbelievable picture, right? This altar that is burning, and there's coals and embers in it and fire. We have passages that talk about a redeeming fire, a refining fire that burns out the chaff, right? That the strange little angel seraphim comes and picks it up and touches Isaiah's lips. And he says, you are forgiven. Not because of anything you have done. What has Isaiah done at this point? Basically, cowered in the corner and said, have mercy on me, O God. I am unworthy. That's what he's done. And God says, you are forgiven. Right? You are new. You are a new creation. You know what? You're not equipped on your own. You're not good enough to accept this calling on your own. Guess what? I don't need your help, Isaiah, because I am powerful. I don't need your expertise. Isaiah, you may be a great orator. You may be a great poet. All of those things. And those are wonderful gifts that I have given you. But Isaiah, I don't need you, but I'm going to call you. And I'm going to equip you. Because I want you to be a voice in the wilderness. I want you to go out to the people. Right? God doesn't need us, but he wants us to participate in his kingdom, to be part of it. He calls all of us. Most of us, not as dramatically as Isaiah, but he's calling all of us. Then it continues, verse 8, and I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Then I said, here I am, send me. That's a powerful moment, isn't it? Isaiah goes from completely unworthy to saying, I cannot do this. But then when God tells him, no, you can, and then when God is asking, and what is God doing? He doesn't tell Isaiah. He asks. He asks you to heed the call that he has on you. He's not going to force you to do it. Right? Yeah, very rarely, you can say Jonah, yeah, God definitely kept pushing Jonah, right? Kept poking him. But Jonah could have kept saying no. He tried for a long time. Ultimately, God is asking, right? And he's asking you, who will follow? And Isaiah says, here I am, send me. Now, every sermon that I've heard on this passage has ended right there. In fact, this little thing that I found, 10 minutes before service says Isaiah chapter 6, 1 through 8. It ends with, here I am, send me. Why? Because that's the walk-off moment. If you're familiar with Seinfeld, right? George, he knows once you have a high moment, you're out. And so George at a business meeting starts, and he tells a joke, and people actually laugh, and he's like, I'm out. And he leaves because he's like, it can only go downhill from there. And you know what? He's right. And we know that as people. When you hit the high mark, you say, let's stand and sing and let's worship. And we all leave with wonderful feelings because look at what God is going to do. He has called us and now we have responded. And he said, here I am, send me. Let's go out the door. And that feels really good. Verse 9, it's not even a different paragraph. We literally stop in verse 8. Verse 9, there's not even there's not even a break in our Bibles, right? Like it's all together. And he said, so this is God. And he said, okay, you just said yes. No takebacks. And he said, go and say to this people. There's just those things that if you remember like your parents saying and just the way they said it, you're like, oh. When God says, go tell this people, you know it's not going to be good. It says, keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. Make the heart of this people dull and their eyes heavy and blind their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn and be healed. Then I said, this is Isaiah, how long, oh Lord? It's like, okay, how long do I have to do this? Is this like one message, one Sunday, or one Saturday? Just one, right? One Saturday. Then I said, how long, O Lord? And he said, until cities lie waste without inhabitant and houses without people, and the land is a desolate waste. Let's stand and sing. That's why you stop at verse 8. Because we are a people that we have gotten so comfortable, we don't like to hear the full context. But what has he just called Isaiah to do? He's like, I want you to bring my message to the people, but guess what? They're not going to hear you. They're not going to listen to you. They're not going to see it. They're not going to pay attention to it. They have already crossed the Rubicon. They've gone too far. They're not coming back. Right? We can argue, well, did God make it where they couldn't come? They're not coming back. God knows it. But he calls Isaiah to go and share the truth anyway. And he calls Isaiah to call them to repentance. Call them to come back. Tell them to come back. But he's very brutally honest with Isaiah. Yeah, they're not going to do it. But you keep doing it. You keep being faithful. You keep following the call that I have in your life. You see, way too often we connect following God and being faithful to Him. When we do that, it will lead to earthly successes. That's why we like Esther. It led to earthly success. You know what? I need to keep going because the end of this passage is important. The land is desolate and waste, and the Lord removes people far away, and the forsaken places are many in the midst of the land, and though a tenth remain in it, it will be burned again like a terebinth or an oak whose stumps remain when it is felled. The holy seed is its stump. It's going to burn things down to the stump. And then in other places in Isaiah, what does he say? The stump will sprout. And that leads to the coming of Christ. But so often we think if God calls us, it's going to work out like Esther. And we're going to slay the giant in front of us. It's going to work out like David whenever he faced Goliath. Right? And there are many times it does. And there are lots of blessings that come from you being faithful to God. But here's the reality, and I believe that if you just look through history, here's the norm. You can be faithful to God, and it's not going to lead to what you would consider earthly successes. And by the way, if the reason that you say yes to following God is because you want earthly successes, I promise you it won't. And that is what we have done and kind of the image that we have portrayed intentionally and unintentionally. Right? Because I completely understand stopping as Isaiah chapter 8 because you want to motivate people to say, yes, send me. The problem is then we're not preparing people for when they say, yes, send me, and they go out there and they're all excited and the world says, shut up. I'm tired of hearing that. And not only that, dude, you're a bigot. Don't you know it's 2024? Right? That doesn't feel like success. But God has called us to preach and to share the truth with a society that may not listen. But we have to be responsible, and we have to seek righteousness. And we let God handle the results. Because guess what? He is always gathering a remnant. He is not done. Right? Our society may continue its decline, but God is not done. And God will bring redemption. He will bring justice. We need to be faithful until He does. And I encourage you, as we're in this season of Lent, to ask God to show you what is He calling you to do. What's the question He's asking you? And you know what? It's probably not going to be go and save the world. It's probably going to be, hey, here's what you need to do with yourself. Here's what you need to do with your family. And then once you get those in line, here's what you need to go and do in the community. And then maybe you move beyond that, and here's what you do in the state. And then maybe He calls you to do something bigger. And I say bigger, not better. He calls us to different things. But leave the results up to Him. Don't get discouraged when we don't experience earthly success. Isaiah did not experience earthly success, but he was faithful to God. Be faithful to God. Let's go to Him and pray.